This is Kim Meyer, host of Choose to Rise. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hi, this is Baxter Colburn, host of the Verse of the Day podcast here on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Verse of the Day, where we take a look at real-world experiences and applications to one Bible verse every Monday through Friday as we get an idea of what it looks like to be a little bit better of a Christian and how we can make this world a better place, one verse at a time. I hope you'll join me every single Monday through Friday right here on Public House Media. And I hope you'll subscribe by going to Apple Podcasts or wherever you find good podcasts as well. Once again, thanks for tuning in to the following broadcast here on Public House Media.
The latest headlines.
The Houston Astros, the defending World Series champions, got better adding Garrett Cole.
The insightful interviews.
Rick Saratella, NFL Draft Bible. With how much emphasis is put on the position, yet how many over the last couple of years we've had questions. Why do we put such an emphasis on drafting a quarterback number one overall?
The bottom line is there's not enough good quarterbacks to go around. And I think with the new CBA, it's really a low-risk gamble now. If you look at the playoff teams, the common denominator, good quarterback play.
The hottest takes.
I think the guy to blame is the one guy who hasn't left yet. I think Russell Westbrook is one of the bigger problems in Oklahoma City.
Can all be found on Press Row. Broadcasting is part of the Public House Media Network. Here's your host.
It doesn't matter what your name is.
Christian Heimel.
Welcome on Press Row, everybody. Broadcasting is part of the Public House Media Network. Christian Heimel here with you. It has been another week of turmoil and scandal and tragedy in the Big Ten, and it has caused some serious big problems for Ohio State and for the University of Maryland. There is something about an athletic program that needs to be held to a higher standard and sometimes can be held to a higher standard. However, in tragic situations like the ones we currently face at both Ohio State and at Maryland, it's instances where the culture becomes questioned. Is that culture safe? Is that culture where parents want to send their children? And you got to look at it from a couple of different perspectives. One being that of the program. One being that of, is this the culture they want to provide? And then another one of the parents and the player, the son, the child, daughter, whoever it is, athlete, if this is the culture they want to learn from. And that's an interesting debate with regards to all of this. We're going to touch on the ins and outs about it, but I want to bring up this idea that's been discussed about the culture of Maryland after the blasphemous, I shouldn't say blasphemous, after the blistering report from ESPN last week about the culture there with DJ Durkin, the head coach, following the death of Jordan McNair. And we're going to touch on this with Aaron Torres of The Athletic, Fox Sports radio host and host of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast, coming up in just a little bit. But we need to understand something here. There are different ways of coaching. There are different styles of leadership. There are different ways to manage people. Some of them work, some of them do not. But they only work or do not work for certain people. Some are motivated by competition. Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, LeBron James, they're motivated by competition, by having someone just as good, if not better than them on their team or in the clubhouse with them. They become much better. They become more motivated. Sometimes it's done by example. Cal Ripken was one of those ones who was a tremendous leader. Sometimes it's done by instilling fear. Fear is a tremendous motivator. And sometimes that is done more so by coaches than it is by fellow players. And in the world of college sports, that is done to an extreme a lot. I could tell you stories from multiple coaches that I have seen, that I have worked with. I've seen coaches kick basketballs into the stands, frustrated after a play. I have seen coaches force kids to run steps in a gymnasium after an hour and a half practice. I have seen coaches require, Queen's Throne, where you're standing, trying to sit up against the wall while balancing on your feet, while balancing your back against the wall and trying to sit straight for God knows how long. I've been a part of cultures where the coach was right in your face and they treat it almost like boot camp. The thing, though, is for some people that works. For others, it doesn't. And that's the thing that needs to be remembered here. The important part about all of this, the number one thing, is that Jordan McNair's death, the 19-year-old who collapsed on May 29th, had a body temperature of 106 degrees, died reportedly of a heat stroke 2 weeks later. That is not a byproduct of the culture in which Maryland is. That is a byproduct of poor medical staff, poor athletic training, poor recognition. That is not a byproduct of a coach yelling or a senior leader getting in the face of somebody. It is a byproduct directly of the athletic training staff. And I think the president of the university, Wallace Lowe, when he said that the school accepts legal and moral responsibility for the mistakes made by its athletic training staff, that's the right thing to say. It comes a little too late. It comes 2 months after the fact that this kid died. But he's absolutely right, because it is the training staff. Yes, the coach probably pushed the kid a little too far, but the athletic training staff needs to be aware of that. When you see a kid struggling to stand upright, when you see a kid who, reportedly had a seizure, and you don't call 911 for an hour after that. The fact that they didn't take his temperature once, they did not try cold water immersion to try to help this kid. That's not on the coaching staff. That's on the training staff. That is 100% on the training staff. And it's just unfortunate. It really is unfortunate that a life was lost. I can't say it's a part of the culture, though. I can't say that. And that's the thing about culture. I mean, we need to understand something. We talk about a winning culture. We talk about, a culture where, for instance, Ohio State with Zach Smith, a culture where domestic abuse is tolerated, potentially, with Urban Meyer. I said that last week on the show. It's Urban Meyer's culture. It's not Florida. It's not Ohio State. It's Urban Meyer's culture. It seems as though Urban Meyer did the bare minimum, the letter of the law, what he was supposed to do. Who knows if he loses his job or not. But that's the thing about this. The culture is not that of the University of Maryland, the Ohio State University. It's the culture of the people who run it. And more often than not, I can guarantee you DJ Durkin did not hire the athletic training staff. That is not part of his culture. The bullying, the intensity of his coaching staff, maybe. The unhealthy eating habits, using food punitively, that is try to motivate by fear. That does not work for a lot of people. That is DJ Durkin's culture. Not recognizing that a kid is suffering heat stroke and in very serious danger, I don't know if that's part of his culture. It's a part of the athletic training staff now, unfortunately. Maryland did a lot of things right. They did a lot of things too late, though. And that's the problem, because in all of this is a 19-year-old who doesn't go home to his family. A family who has to bury their teenage son in Jordan McNair. And that's the tragic part about it. We'll touch on this more with Aaron Torres. Does DJ Durkin lose his job? Is Urban Meyer safe at Ohio State? What's the latest with regards to Urban Meyer, Zach Smith, and everything surrounding the Buckeyes football program? We'll touch on that and a whole lot more with Aaron Torres on the other side of the break. You're on Press Row, broadcasting as part of the Public House Media Network.
Listen to every episode and get the latest shows sent right to you. Subscribe to Press Row on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spreaker.com, and Stitcher.com. Or visit us online at www.thephmedia.com.
Hi, this is Emily.
This is Lindsay.
And this is Elizabeth,
co-hosts of Beauties and Headcanons here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Once you are done with this episode, we hope you'll come check out our show, Beauties and Headcanons, where we talk nerdy to you about fandoms, fan fiction, and all pop culture for nerds that you can think of. A new show comes out every Friday.
Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Beauties and Headcanons. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Press Row with Christian Heimel, a Public House Media podcast.
Welcome back on Press Row. Christian Heimel here with you. It's been a very difficult August for the for the sport of college football. Of course, with Ohio State and then Maryland, UNC involved in there as well. To help us break it all down a little bit and discuss more, Aaron Torres, host of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. You can also catch him on Fox Sports Radio, as well as The Athletic, back on the program. Aaron, as always, we appreciate the time.
Christian, pleasure is mine, man. How you doing?
I'm good, pal. And it's very strange that we're still a couple of weeks away from college football season kicking off, and yet the turmoil, the negative news is in full flux. Real quick, I mean, I want to touch on as much as we can, but with regards to Ohio State and what we have seen, hasn't been much news. Obviously, the whole the DUI case with Zach Smith that he held from Urban Meyer came out earlier this week. But what's been the latest with regards to the Buckeyes football program?
Yeah, that is the latest, Christian, as far as Zach Smith. Obviously, we found out about another arrest. His lawyer claimed that Urban Meyer never knew about that. And obviously, it just paints this guy in kind of a darker picture, a darker shadow. Look, I mean, I think that this committee, this independent investigation, they're doing their due diligence right now. It doesn't change the fact that, what this comes down to is very simply, did Urban Meyer report things up the food chain? Did he do enough by contractual obligation? And if he did, he'll probably keep his job. I think that that's one thing that maybe people, unlike you and I, that aren't following this thing, hour by hour, minute by minute, this isn't about, is Urban Meyer a good guy? It's not about, where
right.
he stands on domestic. Yeah, it really is as simple as, did he do enough by the minimum letter of his contract? Because if not, and Ohio State fires him, they're going to owe him $40 million. So it's a weird kind of litigious thing, and it's a shame that that it comes down to that as opposed to kind of quote unquote doing the right thing or whatever. But that's where we're at, and it seems like if the timeline they gave us, the 14 days, holds true, we should get a resolution here in the next couple days.
Feels as though like he's going to keep his job for the most part, just maybe suspended a couple of games.
Yeah, I think right now, look, my stance, I was actually, you mentioned, I work for Fox Sports Radio. I was actually hosting the day that he released that statement. We were on air as that statement went out and went live. And my stance since then is kind of never really changed. I think that Urban Meyer is too smart. I think his lawyers are too well paid to let him release that statement without proof that he ran it up the food chain. I mean, to me, it seems pretty simple. It seems like a thing that should be pretty easy to track down. Be it, via email, text message, whatever, proof that it was sent up to the athletic administration there, and then they handled it from there. But yeah, it really is looking like he is going to keep his job because, like I said, I just think using common sense, I don't think his lawyers released that statement unless they are positive that, that he did, like I said, did enough by the letter of his contract, which is unfortunate that that's the only stipulation, but I think that's where we're at.
Go from domestic abuse associated with Ohio State football, and you go to another team in the Big Ten, University of Maryland, and the tragedy of Jordan McNair, a 19-year-old who loses his life because of heat stroke, that it turns out, then there's this whole thing about the culture of DJ Durkin's program with the Terrapins. You heard statements from the athletic director, statements from the president of the university earlier this week. how does this kind of stuff stay under wraps for this long after a player, a 19-year-old, a teenager, dies in an athletic program?
Yeah, it's been kind of disappointing to see the kind of public reaction to this. I mean, the fact is, look, Maryland launched an independent investigation when this player died, but it wasn't until the ESPN report really came out last Friday that people got all up in arms. And look, we could talk about the culture at Maryland, all that stuff, but I think at the end of the day, what we have to remember is that a young man died. And what was disappointing is, look, I get it that everything starts and ends with the football coach. I understand that. But I think we also have to remember that whatever you think of kind of what happened inside the program, DJ Durkin wasn't there when this player passed away. DJ Durkin, by NCAA rule, is not allowed to be there because it was an off-season workout. And so to hear some specifics from the Maryland administration on I guess it was Tuesday afternoon when they did their press conference, it was just I don't know what the word is other than embarrassing, sad. I don't know what the right word is, but you start to hear some specifics, and the fact that, it took almost an hour to call paramedics, the fact that, they didn't put this kid in a cold tub, they didn't take his temperature, them being the trainers, they didn't do something as simple as put a cold ice pack on the back of his neck. I thought on ESPN, right around that time that the press conference happened, ESPN kind of went to live coverage, and they had Emmanuel Acho on their broadcast, who played at Texas and played in the NFL. And I thought he brought up the best point that I've heard is that the first thing you do, you learn in elementary school is that when you get too hot, put a cold towel, put some ice on the back of your neck. And the fact that there were several, trained, educated professionals, I mean, I think there is no doubt that the University of Maryland, the adults in charge, obviously failed this kid, and it's tragic because he's obviously no longer here. But I think that so much of the focus is on DJ Durkin. I think we're kind of missing the forest through the trees, if that makes sense.
100%. And it's kind of interesting because you're right, and we're speaking with Aaron Torres of The Athletic as well as Fox Sports Radio. You can also check out the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. But you're right. I mean, we've kind of this week really been talking about the culture and about this idea of bullying and coaches screaming at kids, and is that the right way to coach? Is there a right way to coach? But you bring up the point of there were fully educated, well-educated training staff there, and you and I have been around sports enough to know that those people kind of jump right in and push coaches out of the way to do what they have to do to be able to make sure a player or an athlete is okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the point of really, having them there is if they're not ready to respond in a situation like this. And, I feel bad, obviously. Look, bad is a relative term because somebody died, right? So, we obviously the thoughts and prayers are with the kid and the family. But, you're blaming the strength and conditioning coach. The strength and conditioning coach is put in place to kind of quote-unquote toughen up the guys. And, I'm not being apologetic for the fact that a kid died on his watch, but we all know, anyone who's played sports knows, there's a difference between being physically exhausted and a coach pushing you beyond your comfort zone and being in danger of losing your life. And this is exactly why they have trainers. This is exactly why these institutions pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to employ these people is, the head coach handles football, the strength and conditioning coach is there to toughen everybody up, and the trainers are there. They're supposed to be the middle ground. I mean, look, we all watch Hard Knocks. We all watch Last Chance U, and we all see that there's a trainer at every practice saying, you know what, today this guy just can't go. That ankle's too bad, or that knee is too bad, or whatever it is. And so, again, I'm not making excuses for the head coach. I'm not making excuses for the strength and conditioning coach, but that's the disappointing thing to me. And that's the thing that, again, I don't want to say I feel bad for the assistant coach, for the strength and conditioning coach, but, like I said, it's so tough to know that line between a kid that's dogging it and not giving 100% and a kid that really is in grave danger. And so, obviously, like I said, a lot of people failed this kid. It's just really sad to see that this was the result. And this was one that, the worst part about all of it is this just felt so preventable. And it's just such a bummer to kind of find out some specific details as we did the other day.
How do you think this affects the Maryland program at all with regards to DJ Durkin and his job?
I mean, I don't think he'll survive it. I think it's a similar situation to Ohio State, where right now, I mean, they're both kind of under litigation. I think the big difference is DJ Durkin's buyout is only $5 million. This is one, I don't think he can keep his job. I don't think he will keep his job. I don't necessarily agree with that, by the way. Again, I understand that, you know, everything falls in line behind him as the leader of that program, and he hired the strength and conditioning coach. I just find it really hard to blame a head coach, you know, who was not at the workout. But, you know, a couple factors. He's not Urban Meyer in the sense that he's not an icon that's competing for national championships every year. He doesn't have a massive buyout that the school can't afford if they're to fire him without cause, and I think they'll be able to find cause. But three, you know, I just think it's the type of thing where there's so much bad PR, there's so much negativity, and then with the ESPN report about the quote-unquote culture around the program, you know, I tend to lean a little bit with Will Muschamp in that I think in any football locker room, when you have 100 players, 20, 10 assistant coaches, trainers, whatever, you're always going to find people that are unhappy. So I do kind of understand where Will Muschamp was coming from, but I just think the combination of everything is going to ultimately cost DJ Durkin his job. They're just doing the full scale investigation so that they can fire him with cause and try to get out of paying that buyout.
I know you're short on time, but I want to ask you, because you also cover college football for The Athletic, college basketball for The Athletic. Last week, the changes made from the NCAA, the rules that were announced with regards to campus visits, with regards to allowing a player to potentially return to school if he does go undrafted in the NBA draft. How does this help, or does it help college basketball, the rules that were announced last week?
You know, I really don't know that all of it makes all that much of a difference at this exact moment. I mean, obviously, I know that you've probably gone through it on the show, Christian, but most of the things that went into place are really effective when an NBA draft rule changes. So, for example, you know, players can't really get advice from agents until the draft rule changes. Players that want to return to college after going through the draft process, it's only for players that are actually invited to the combine, so that really kind of cuts down the pool that's actually available. I think the thing that interestingly affects college basketball the most is the stuff that the fans can't fundamentally wrap their arms around. I mean, there are now 2 more kind of recruiting periods in June. Coaches aren't happy about it, so they have now, instead of AAU camps, they have high school availability during June. Coaches are not happy about it because it means 2 more weeks on the road during the summer. I know nobody's feeling too bad for a $1 million head coach, but it's 2 more weekends that they're away from their family. For people who don't really know the recruiting calendar, they're basically gone every weekend in April and every weekend in July. And obviously during the season, it's 24/7 with from about October through March. So you take 2 more weekends away from the family. Coaches aren't happy about that. And then I think the other thing is the official visits. Great for kids. Coaches aren't totally keen on it, just from the perspective that there's going to be a lot of kids wanting a trip to your school that have no interest in coming. So it's the little stuff, the stuff that probably doesn't mean as much to fans, that around college basketball circles actually impacts the sport a little bit more.
He's Aaron Torres. Catch him on Fox Sports Radio as well as The Athletic and, of course, the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. As always, it's fun talking with you. We appreciate the time. Thanks a lot, Aaron.
Thank you, Christian. Appreciate it.
All right, that's Aaron Torres. We'll wrap up shop when we return. Your listener questions and a little interesting take there with regards to Maryland. We'll touch on that as well when we come back. You're on Press Row, broadcasting as part of the Public House Media Network.
Want to be part of the show? Go to Facebook and search Press Row Podcast-Public House Media, or find us on Twitter and Instagram at Press Row PHM. You can also email the program, pressrowphm@gmail.com.
This is Kim Meyer, the host of Choose to Rise here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Choose to Rise, where we talk about living with positive mindsets, how to increase our confidence, building our faith, and living out our life on purpose. A new show comes out via podcast every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And if you want to catch the episode live instead, stop by Public House Media around 6:45 Central Standard Time, Monday, Wednesday, Friday as well. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you'll never miss an episode of Choose to Rise. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Press Row with Christian Heimel, a Public House Media podcast.
Back on Press Row, close up shop as we do every week with your listener questions. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, share us with your friends and family. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spreaker.com, Stitcher.com, wherever you get your podcasts, and of course, thephmedia.com. You can get some great show gear as well. Check out all the other awesome shows as part of Public House Media. As always, you can check us out on Facebook, Press Row by Public House Media, Twitter and Instagram handle at PressRowPHM, or you can email the show, pressrowphm@gmail.com. Want to touch on real quick with Aaron Torres there, and I mentioned this in the first segment. I kind of agree that DJ Durkin does get fired in this, mainly because I don't think it's weird to say this. I don't think he would have been fired solely because of the death of Jordan McNair. He wasn't even there. He had nothing to do with regards to that. That's the athletic training staff. The athletic training staff, I'm surprised we haven't really heard much from them as regards to, their job statuses with regards to their names or anything like that. But the report from ESPN about the culture, the bullying, and all that stuff, and listen, like I said, this is DJ Durkin's culture. It's not the culture of the University of Maryland. But there's a difference between the bullying with regards to using food as punitive, in a punitive way. There's a difference in just yelling at a kid. There's a difference, in going Bobby Knight or going, Mike Krzyzewski. There's a difference with regards to that. When you actually physically put your hands on a kid, that's different. But, it's just part of their culture, and I kind of agree. I think if it had not been for that report from ESPN, I don't think DJ Durkin would be in jeopardy of losing his job. But that being said, again, there's a 19-year-old, there's a kid. Jordan McNair's death is in his program, whether he was there or not. He will probably lose his job for that. But just interesting to hear Aaron Torres say that. I don't know if there's many people who have had that similar take, that I have, where you kind of put the blame more on the training staff than you do on the actual coaches. So get your listener questions as we do every single week. First one coming here from Joseph in Georgia. Ronald Acuna Jr. hitting by a pitch yesterday. Do you think it was intentional? This is what's weird, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago with Ted Berg about the unwritten rules of baseball and a guy getting hit. I don't understand why you're hitting Acuna there. He's hit home runs in 5 straight games. He's hit leadoff homers in 4 straight games. But it's the very first pitch. Jose Urena, who is known for throwing inside and hitting batters. He leads the National League, by the way, with 11 hit batters. I don't know if that's intentional. I don't think he's trying to hurt the kid. I don't think, he's upset about, he didn't give up those home runs. It's a leadoff homer. I don't think the kid's trying to show off or anything like that. But I can't say that that's intentional. I understand why the Braves were upset. I understand why Ender Inciarte, why, Eric Young Sr., Brian Snitker, I understand why they were upset. But it's just, I don't understand the reasoning for that being intentional. And that's the problem, I kept watching the replay, and the Braves announcers kept saying both these were concerned about this. Why? What did Acuna do? I mean, if he did something, he probably deserves it. But, this is part of the unwritten rules of baseball that Ted Berg, as we heard a couple weeks ago, hates, and why it's one of the problems with Major League Baseball right now is there are so many people who are kind of over it. and they don't understand this. I don't think it was intentional, but if it was, it makes no sense to me whatsoever to plug Acuna like that. Good thing for him, though, because according to MLB rules, his only plate appearance was him being hit by a pitch. His consecutive game streak is still intact. He can still try to go out and hit a home run for the 6th straight time when he returns to action. But we'll see, and hopefully he's not out for long. We'll see what happens, though. Let's see. Mike in Texas. Mike D'Antoni says Carmelo is a better fit with the Rockets than with the Knicks. Do you agree? I'm kind of intrigued about this because Mike D'Antoni coached Carmelo in New York, obviously, and they had a little bit of a falling out there. But D'Antoni said in the USA Today, he said in New York, when they gave away half the team for Carmelo in that trade, everybody expected us to win a championship. It wasn't realistic. It put a lot of pressure on everybody, and it kind of burst the pipes. I think this is totally different. We've got a team that is a whole bunch of veterans that really have got one thing in mind, and that's to win a championship, and we have the possibility. I think he's right in that sense. I think that the Rockets are a better fit because they're actually built to win. The Knicks gave away the entire team to sign Carmelo, and they were terrible, and they expected Carmelo to do it himself, and he's not that kind of player. But when you've got Chris Paul, when you got James Harden, when you've got Clint Capella, I think the Rockets are in a much better spot. So we'll see what happens. I'm intrigued. I mean, honestly, the Rockets are 1 3-pointer away from heading to the NBA Finals and beating Golden State in Game 7. Just one. And I don't, so I don't know if this changes things, especially with Boogie Cousins in Golden State, but I do completely agree. I think that he's in a better spot than he was in New York with his same head coach. Let's see. Ray in Cleveland wants to know, Des Bryant is supposed to be meeting with the Browns today on Thursday. Does he stay in Cleveland? I think he should. I think it's probably the best option for Des. It's the only team that wants to pay him. It's the only team that really, really needs him right now. I've said consistently I think that he should go and stay with the Patriots because it just feels like a Patriots move to sign Des Bryant. But in the same vein, Jarvis Landry is there. David Njoku is there. If Josh Gordon comes back, great. Tyrod Taylor certainly helps. I don't think this helps the Browns win anything, but I think it certainly helps in the development of Baker Mayfield, helps in the development of Tyrod Taylor as well. So we'll see exactly what happens, but that could be really, really interesting. It should be fun to watch as well. As always, you guys, we appreciate you joining us here on the show. Big thanks to Aaron Torres of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast, Fox Sports Radio, and The Athletic. And for joining us. And if you didn't get a chance to hear what he had to say, go on back and listen to it. I mean, we're always here, stored on Spreaker.com, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and, of course, thephmedia.com. Don't forget, you can always send us your questions. Twitter and Instagram handles at PressRowPHM. You can email the show, PressRowPHM@gmail.com. Head over to our Facebook page, Press Row Podcast by Public House Media. And if you want to find me on social media, you can do that at Chris Heimel, ChrisHeimall. As always, it's fun having you guys here on the show. We appreciate the support every single week. We will see you next week on Press Row, broadcasting as part of the Public House Media Network.